Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I'm a psychotherapist, teacher, consultant, and most importantly, a wounded healer, living and working in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm your host, Anne Remy. I'm a counseling psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and trauma specialist living in Brighton, UK. On this show, we interview folks in a variety of healing professions, and we discuss the intersectional journey of healing self while caring for others.
But we're not just focused on individual healing, but also healing on the collective level, from white supremacy, late-stage capitalism, and the patriarchy. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Anne.
Oh, hey, Sarah.
Happy Pride!
Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month. Yay.
As we're recording this, my hair is not yet rainbowified, but it will be.
My fiance and I just spent the afternoon sitting on a deck listening to a drag queen serenade us in the sun. So
that's lovely. That is really lovely.
Yeah. It's the best.
Amazing. Well, how you doing?
I'm good. It's as we record this, by the time people listen to this, I'll be done with my master's degree.
Woo! And we were just talking about the challenges of trying to transfer your education and experience to the US.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody who's listening knows how to do that, please reach out and let us know.
Help a girl out.
Yeah. Help a sister out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we record this, I'm like 13 days away from finishing.
Congrats.
And it's all the work is done. It's just waiting to go in front of a panel of people and tell them I know what I'm doing.
Oh, is this like you have to say things or literally just stand there and be like, yep, I did this. I know what I'm doing. Is it ceremonial or actually a thing?
Oh, no, it's an actual thing. Like we have to talk about what I do and how I do it and why it makes sense theoretically and how I'm a safe and ethical practitioner.
I really wish we did that in the US, though.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think it's a good thing. And it's really nice because you get so much kind of constructive feedback from people who hear things differently and understand therapy differently. And it's not given in a, like, you've done this wrong, just in a, here's some things to consider going forward. But where you're at now is great. So,
I mean, it's also interesting to think about you actually knowing what you're doing when you graduate. Whereas at least I can talk about Masters of Social Work programs. And maybe it was just me. Maybe I was the one person who graduated and did not know what I was doing. I'm guessing not. I'm guessing it wasn't just me.
Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, it's an overwhelming process to only squeeze into 2 years. But of course, that's such an American way to try to do it. Because how long was your program in total?
It's 5 years. And I've already been in private practice for 2.5 almost.
Yeah.
So
it's very different. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like you actually get to know what you're doing by the time you're finished. So pros and cons.
Pros and cons.
Yeah.
5 years is a long time.
It is a long time. But I trust you to go out there with with a client, whereas I would not trust my former self. Well, I literally, maybe I've told this story on the podcast before, maybe I haven't. I remember getting my first job out of grad school because I had worked, my internship was in drug and alcohol counseling. If I would have been in a rehab, I would have been fine because I knew exactly what to do for, groups and that sort of thing. And individual, if I was like assessing people's drug and alcohol issues, but like just to do ongoing work in a session. I remember I had my first session with this kid. I'll never forget his face. I can't remember his name, but I'll never forget his face. And doing the assessment and then panicking, realizing next time I see him, I have no idea what to do. And I like ran upstairs. We had all of our offices in like one room where we were just like all in. And I was like, I don't know what to do next.
Aww.
And everybody was so sweet. And they were like, here's an intervention and here's an intervention, like pulling all these like papers and like activities and stuff. And I probably would have been able to figure it out, but I felt like I had no idea what I was doing.
That's such a nice supportive environment, though. I love that you had that.
Oh my, I think I really lucked out because my community mental health experience was so generative and like so supportive, and I learned so much. Shout out to Anjali Shah Johnson, who was on the podcast many years ago. That's probably when I told this story for the first time. Yeah. It was very sweet.
Aw.
Yeah. Speaking of sweet,
it
would be sweet if you wanted to buy some merch for us. Look, it's rubbing off on me. That was good. It took me a second. But yeah, if you want to buy some merch, you can go to tinyurl.com/CWH merch. If you want to give us some money, which we would deeply appreciate.
Love it.
It goes to subsidize the cost of this podcast. You can go to patreon.com/convos with a wounded healer. And then what else can they do? They can rate the podcast, rate and review. It actually helps because when people are like, and actually recently I just went to a conference and I think people got excited after I mentioned my podcast only because they looked it up and we have like 80 something ratings and we've got a 4 point whatever star. So rate this podcast.com/wounded healer. Go rate and review. And that really helps.
Please and thank you.
Yes. So let's talk about today's guest, Harry Aponte. Yeah.
This is completely unrelated to anything, but every time I hear his name, I think of Harry Belafonte, and I start singing in my head. Yeah.
Dale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, your conversation with him was very sweet, and I think it's so nice to hear. It's nice to hear the roots from which the work that we are now doing comes.
Yeah.
Did that make sense grammatically?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll read his bio in a second, but he graduated with his master's in 59? Let me go back. Yeah. 1959, right?
Here's the thing. We have known a lot of the things we know for a long time. And it's so frustrating that we are not further along than we are. And I guess where we are now is in great part to Harry, which you will talk about. But there is something about like, he knew a lot of this stuff a long time ago, and he really had to push to, I guess, make mental health more accessible for people who weren't able to access it because of all the sort of gatekeeping that's done around the industry.
Yeah, I mean, basically the first half of the interview, you hear Harry talk really specifically about how he was kind of developing for himself this recognition of families are not getting served, not because they don't want help, but because the help that was being given it wasn't clicking. It wasn't the right sort of help. It wasn't the right sort of access, like you said. And then in the second half, we start to talk more about his person of the therapist. So I don't know if it's really a modality, but method really of recognizing that the experiences that we've gone through as humans inform us as therapists and almost always make us better therapists because it's like it's closing the gap of distance between us and the client, which is, I mean, clearly why I have started this podcast because I think that's true.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
No, I'm excited for people to hear it.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about Harry J. Aponte. He was born in the U.S. to Puerto Rican parents, earned his master's in social work from Fordham University in 1959. His career took a significant turn when he began working with Sal Minuchin at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic, eventually becoming the clinic's director. He's lectured across Europe, South America, Korea, and throughout the United States. Additionally, he's an author of several influential books and is currently in private practice. Early in his career, he developed a keen interest in leveraging therapists' personal life experiences to connect with clients, understand their issues, and apply these insights in therapeutic work. This approach, known as the person of the therapist training, has become a cornerstone of his professional philosophy. So please enjoy my conversation with Harry Aponte.
Yay!
Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. And we believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery, where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group. Hello, Dr. Aponte. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. How are you?
I'm fine, Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm good. For listeners who don't know you, I've already read your bio to them, but I would love for you to introduce yourself the way you like to describe who you are.
I'm Puerto Rican, born and raised in New York, and I graduated from Fordham many years ago, got my master's in social work, got some postmaster's training at the Menninger Clinic. After that, I worked there for about 7 years. Then I was invited by Sal Minuchin to come to Philadelphia to work with disadvantaged families. And that's something that I really leapt into with a lot of enthusiasm, because that, to me, it was like, okay, I'm going to be able to serve the kinds of families that I came from, because early part of my life was, what I remember was in Harlem, Black Harlem, not Spanish Harlem. And from there, I went to the South Bronx. And then after I graduated from Fordham, about a year after that, I went to the Menninger Clinic to get a year of postmaster's training. And then I stayed there for another 7 years working with them. Very intimidating kind of atmosphere, at least at that time. I don't know what it's like now, but there were people who were very wealthy.
Professionals, right? It's like doctors and pilots.
Movie actors and governors and people from other countries, people who had all kinds of reputations, all of which was just the sort of thing that, coming out of a ghetto environment, was just overwhelming to me. And I had to try to get used to it. And I felt sorry for the people that I was having to work with, because I was assigned to working in the C.F. Menninger Memorial Hospital. And they said, well, we'll deal with the patients and you deal with their families.
Ooh, yeah.
And so that was a big challenge. But fortunately, I was able to convince the psychiatrist, who's the head of the section of the hospital, Peter Novotny was his name. And I said, well, it doesn't make sense to me to separate families from the patients. I think if we're going to really serve them, give a complete service that dealt with what their relationships were and what issues they had as a family, we have to see them together. And he said, well, let's try it. And we tried it. And then I had the advantage of working with the families and the patients. I was interested in family therapy, and it was new to me, but it was something that I felt was needed. And so I had to invent my own idea of what family therapy was, since there was no one to teach me that there. Right. But it worked. We had the lowest number of people who were leaving hospital against medical advice.
Oh, wow.
So we had evidence that something was working in the way we were approaching our efforts there. And then sometime towards the end of my stay there, I got an invitation from Sal Minuchin to come to Philadelphia. He had just left New York.
I love that you just drop that name casually, even though it's like a master to many of us.
Well, he was a master.
Yeah.
And the thing that he was doing was that he was working with disadvantaged families. And the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic at that time was in a African American neighborhood, and the services that we were offering was to that particular environment. And since I had lived in the first about, I guess, 7 years of my life in Black Harlem, it was my environment, so that I felt completely comfortable there, and I felt like I was doing a service that was a real service. It wasn't a business.
Right.
Okay? And after a while there, he put me in charge of the clinical services that we were offering, which I really enjoyed. He was doing the training, and so then I was overseeing the clinical services that we were doing. And it also gave me a chance to try to be inventive. And knowing what these families were dealing with, my thought was family therapy is wonderful, and I'm learning how to do it from him and from other people at the Child Guidance Clinic. But when the families are disadvantaged, then you really have to look at the community. You can't just look at the families themselves.
It's a good social worker.
That's it. You're right.
Yep.
So I sent one of the therapists out to some of the Black churches there, and I began to meet with the people who represented the community. And well, they decided that they wanted to tell the clinic how to run its services. And I said, well, I don't think you know how to do that. I think you can help me with the community, but I'll have to deal with the clinical work myself and the staff that we have that's trained to do the clinical work. And so they weren't happy with that. So I stopped meeting with them. I then went into the neighborhood to find out who's the leader in the neighborhood. And I went walking around talking to people from various parts of the neighborhood to find out who was really most influential there. And I found there was a guy named Jim Lester. He was I don't know, I guess at that time they would have called him a militant, but he was Black and very intimidating. But he oversaw what was going on in that part of Philadelphia. And it was a part of Philadelphia where there weren't any gang killings.
Oh, wow.
He made that happen.
Wow.
Or I should say he made that not happen.
Right.
And after a while, we got to know each other. We would sit in the bar and have a drink together and talk about what we were trying to accomplish. And I said to him, you're really good with these kids in the neighborhood. We're very good with families. So why don't we just get together and work together? And he said, okay, how do we do that? And I said, well, why don't we just find out the kids who are not going to school, and let's see if we can get a hold of them, and then we'll work with them and see if we can be successful. I said, all we have to do is go to the school superintendent and see if he'll give us the names of those young people. And he said, well, I don't know the school superintendent. I said, well, that's the advantage. I know the school superintendent.
Exactly. Coalition building.
Right, because I represent the clinic and you will represent the community. And I think if the two of us were to go and sit down with the person who was the head of that particular district, we might work something out. Well, we sat down with him and he said, your plan sounds terrific. I'll give you the names, but you can't do your work during school hours because then you're competing with us.
Right.
Competing with us for kids who weren't going to school.
Right.
So we said, that's okay. And Jim, using his influence in the community, convinced one TV station to let us have a telethon.
Oh, how cool.
We raised some money.
Wow.
We bought a building that was empty, had it renovated. He then went to the University of Pennsylvania to their Department of Education and asked for some of the people who were training to be teachers, if they could come and get their training and experience in this school that we were going to set up.
Wow.
So that was going to start at 3:30 in the afternoon. And they were cooperative. They said, okay, let's go for it. So we did the telethon. We got the money. We bought the building. We renovated it. We got the teachers from the University of Pennsylvania. and they were ready to do the teaching. And then he went house to house to the families
Wow.
and convinced them that, we had something to offer. All the teachers were African Americans.
Wow.
And we filled up the school immediately. Okay.
That's amazing.
We tested the kids. We had our psychologists test the kids to see how they were doing. And Jim would say, to the kids, well, you have to come dress well, comb your hair, and be respectful. Look like you respect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember one kid who did not do that. And Jim said, well, you can't come to our school. These are the kids who weren't attending school. Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he went home crying. He came back the next day with his mother. And she said, I'll make him wash up and clean up and dress up and comb his hair. And she said, all right, no problem. So the kid came in looking all spruced up, and our teachers were working with them, and they were completely dedicated to these kids. I remember one day I decided to sort of go and hide myself, but I wanted to see what happened with these kids because they were supposed to start classes at 3:30, and Jim would lock the door to the school if they were late.
That's funny.
Well,
Wow.
these kids who were not attending school, running to get there on time.
Wow, that's incredible.
And they were absolutely faithful to the school. And they would call Jim Mr. Lester. He would call them Mr. So and Miss So and so. And we tested them. And after a year of their schooling there, these kids advanced 2 and 3 years in that 1 year.
Wow.
They loved the school. The mothers got together and had like a party. They would prepare food and invite all the other mothers to come in and the other families to come in. And so the mothers were proud, the kids were proud, we were proud. So we started something that worked, and there was something that was just had its roots in the community. So we were doing family therapy with the families that needed the therapy, but we also had the kids attending the school in the kind of school that spoke to them and who they really were.
Instead of squeezing them into the mold they were supposed to fit into.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jim was absolutely demanding. If you're gonna come to the school, you get dressed properly, you act like you're somebody and like you're worth something. Yep. And these kids came well dressed, did their homework, did their schoolwork. So they were proud, we were proud. And the Child Guidance Clinic, we were at 17th and Bainbridge at that time, in the middle of the neighborhood. And then Children's Hospital was working with us, and they moved to West Philadelphia, and we moved with them. So we had a new fancy building, and we had a part of the building that was made like into an apartment, so that the families that needed it, a family could come in with their kid and the parents. So we were working with them in the homes when they had problems at home. We were working with them in the clinic, in the apartment that we had, where we had observation mirrors. So the families made the clinic their own home. They were absolutely comfortable there. The kids loved it. And that was the program that we had. And it was successful. And it was a combination of doing family therapy and also doing therapy with the families in the apartment. I invited the city councilmen, people who politically reflected where these kids came from.
Yeah.
And I said to them, when these families, when they have a problem, they don't know who to go to. And when they go someplace, people don't pay attention to them.
Right.
And I want you guys to see what we do. These politicians came and they looked at the place. They talked with the kids. They talked with the parents. They were impressed. They gave us their telephone number, and they gave us a telephone number of the various agencies in the city that serve people in their homes with heavy housing problems having to do with not enough income and so on. And we set up a network that said, the community is supposed to serve these families.
Yes.
And these families were being served. And when they weren't being served, then we would tell them to go talk to the politicians who had their names. And these politicians would call up and then the families would get served. So we had the community serving them. We had the clinic serving them. So we mobilized. We made a community that recognized that these people were worth serving.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So my commitment that I had in terms of my own professional goals for myself, my dreams was, I said, our families don't get recognized by people in the mental health field. And I had heard enough people, at Menninger's, and I heard people from our own Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic who would talk about them as if these people don't know how to make good use of our services. I said, well, maybe you don't know what to do with them. And if you knew what to do with them, they would make good use of your services. So it had to be a matter of trying to orient other people to take these families seriously. Yeah. And they did take them seriously. And the staff really got committed. And then they were found that when they called these services for these families, somebody answered the phone. And if they didn't answer the phone, we called the politician. Yep. His office called, the families got served. Okay. So we were working with these families from a perspective that said, we understand where you're coming from. We understand what you're dealing with. And we're going to connect all of these services to you because these services are there for you. Right. So that happened. Yeah. And the families were being served and the kids were being served.
And they were thriving and flourishing.
Absolutely. The work, as I saw it, this is not a business. This is really a service from the heart. Right. And we had a chance to provide the services in the way that I knew that they needed clinical services, clinicians who were there for them, but they also needed a community that would respond to their needs.
Exactly. And see them as full people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And these families flourished, and the clinicians had the satisfaction of experiencing success with the families because we had set up a model that worked. Yeah. We had told the various schools in that neighborhood, we're there for the kids that you have problems with. And if you have a problem and you want us to be of service, call us up. We'll work with you. Then the intake worker came and said to me one day, they want to send us the kids, but they don't want to give us time to talk with them. I said, well, why don't you just tell them that when they have time to talk with us, then we'll take their kids, but not until then. Well, yeah. Soon after that, then what we set up was that you have a problem, you want to make a referral to us. We want to meet with you, the teachers, the principal, and the families in the school before we take them into the clinic. Okay, we'll try to figure out ways of bringing them together. So I still remember one incident where there was a boy, I forget what his age was, but he must have been in the 4th or 5th grade, African-American boy. He was being suspended, they said, because he had been violent with a teacher. I said, well, let's meet with the teacher and the family and the kid there. I went to the school and I said, tell me what happened. Give me the details. Well, long story short, the mother was working. There was no father in the home. The kid his younger sister was in the school and she was in an earlier grade. And the mother had to work because that was the only source of income they had. Yep. And she said, if anything happens with your sister, you got to go take care of her. Well, he's in the school. Somebody comes and says, hey, your sister's very sick and you may want to find out what's going on. And so the kid then went to the staircase and ran up the staircase to go to the classroom where she was. And there was a young teacher there, white. And she stopped him. She said, this is a downstairs case. This is not an upstairs case.
Goodness.
Okay. Well, all this kid was thinking of is my sister's sick. Right. I'm supposed to take care of her. And then the teacher tried to stop him physically. And then he pushed her. And that was the violence. Right. He wasn't hitting her. He wasn't beating her up. Right. He just getting her out of his way so that he could go take care of his sister. That was the complaint. And then I looked at the principal because I wouldn't do that without the principal being there. And I looked at her and she recognized what had happened, that this was not malice on the kid's part. And she said, all right, we'll take care of this. And they reinstated the boy, in the school. They understood what happened with the sister and the family, and the principal took care of it. And so everything was evened out. If we had not intervened, this boy would have been labeled as he was violent. He was a bad kid. He was anything but that. He was exactly the opposite. He was really somebody who cared, and somebody who was trying to do what his mother couldn't do because she had to go work. And so that was our view, that we had to then look at these families and see what problems they had within the family, but also to look into their neighborhoods, see what problems they had in their neighborhoods, what problems they had with their rent, the kind of housing that they had, with gangs in the neighborhood. So we created a network. Then Jim Lester, who already had a network going with the kids and their gangs and what was going on in their neighborhoods. And then we had the new school that had been set up, and also the facilities that we had at the clinic. All of that was being coordinated, and it was a very successful experiment.
Yeah. And I'd love to ask a question if I can now too, because one of the things I want to make sure we get to is your person of the therapist modality. How I'm sort of connecting this is I hear you say that before you would accept a referral from another therapist, you wanted to be able to talk to that therapist. I'm curious how much of that informed your desire to create this modality and actually, if you could explain what person of the therapist is.
Well, person of the therapist is basically taking the whole mental health model and humanizing it, because I had heard I'm not going to give names, but I had heard from various sources, these families are not able to make use of our services.
Yeah.
And my philosophy was, you don't know how to make use of your skills to offer them to these families so that they could then take advantage of it, because you don't see them as real people.
And you're not that different from them.
That's right.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So my commitment had been to, I've got to write articles, I've got to give talks, I've got to get out to this field of mine.
Yeah.
And have them treat us, whether we're Puerto Ricans or we're African Americans, but disadvantaged families, disadvantaged neighborhoods, they have to treat us as human beings, and they have to relate to us as human beings. Well, I came from a psychoanalytic environment, which was the Menninger Clinic, and they talked there about countertransference, and they talked about how the psychoanalyst has their own personal issues, and they have to go into psychoanalysis themselves in order to try to resolve these issues so that they don't put their own problems onto their patients, which is all fine and good. But they weren't really saying to them, relate to these people as human beings.
Yeah.
Because these families were not going to get on a couch. That's not the kind of problems they had.
Right.
Okay. And so, I thought, we have to prepare the therapist to be able to relate to them as human beings so that they could feel like human beings. They could feel respected and dignified by the therapist themselves.
Right.
So I began thinking, what does that take? Well, I had no problem myself because that's where I came from. But a lot of the other clinicians did not have that background. And I thought, what do I do to help these clinicians see these people as human beings and relate to them as human beings so that they can be trusted?
Right.
People will share with them their own failures, their own problems, and that these therapists will then take seriously what these people are experiencing, what they're up against, and whether it's hospitals or the clinic or the environment of the neighborhood and the gangs and all this, they have their own problems, they have their own environment, and you have to relate to that in a way that the people who come to you see that you understand that, and you understand what they're up against as parents and the kids who were dealing with that. So what I then said to them is, when you sit down with people and you sit down with these families and you sit down with these kids, if you want to know who they are, you have to be vulnerable yourself.
Yep.
Okay. I have problems. You have problems. They have problems. And if you're going to relate to their problems, you have to relate to them as also a wounded healer yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not there with have it all together. I don't have it all together. You don't have it all together.
Sure don't.
So, yes. And so I began to train therapists to sit down as a group and to begin to say, all right, this is my problem. This is my personal issues. It was a little bit embarrassing. They had to talk about, they talked about it. But then what happened is that when they would say that, other therapists would say, oh, I thought I was the only one.
Me too.
Oh,
Exactly.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So after a while, they began to treat their issues as this is just a human condition.
Yes.
These are not freaks that you can't relate to.
Right.
So how do you then feel with them?
Right.
Okay. How do you share their experience? Well, the way you share them is that you have to open yourself to yourself so that when you sit down with them, you're sitting down conscious of your own struggles, conscious of your own family history, which you've already talked about because I helped you talk about, and I helped you treat that as this is part of being a human being. Okay. And then when you try to relate to them, you allow yourself to experience them, which means that they can bore you, they can excite you, they can intimidate you. You feel those feelings because they're human, and you need to allow yourself to experience them. And then they need to be able to experience you as a human being that cares about them.
I had a conversation with someone today who's been in the field for 40 plus years. And my quote unquote complaint of our profession is that I see a lot of people not doing their own work, right? And not recognizing themselves as people who have wounds. And she told me it was both heartening and disheartening at the same time that this has always been an issue in the field. And I'm just curious from your vantage point, why? Like, why do you think therapists struggle? If we know we want to help people, we know people have problems, why do we struggle dealing with our own?
Well, Freud's model, which has been copied by psychoanalysts since then, is if you're going to be a psychoanalyst, then you have to go into psychoanalysis and resolve your issues. Well, you don't resolve your issues.
Right.
Okay.
Never.
Hopefully you get more control over them. You're able to take responsibility for them.
Right.
So that you don't hurt other people, you don't hurt yourself. Okay. But life is an ongoing one challenge after another coming from your own struggle with life, trying to make it work. Okay. And if you can approach your own problems from that perspective, as a therapist, you can go into therapy, but not with the idea that you're going to have it all fixed. Okay. Because I went into psychoanalysis when I was at Menninger's with the illusion that I was going to solve all my personal problems. Well, I didn't solve all my personal problems, but I got a lot of insight into it.
Yeah.
I took responsibility for my own issues. I began, it was a very different perspective that I had, which then allowed me to sit down with therapists and say, hey, you have problems. I have problems. We all have problems. And you know something? Because we have problems, we're able to be better therapists.
Exactly.
Because when we're sitting down with a client, and if we allow ourselves to be conscious of what is triggered in us when we're dealing with them, then we experience them. We don't just hear what they have to say. We don't just observe them, but we also experience their pain, experience their struggles, experience their weakness. It gives us a sense of being able to hurt with them and care about it because we're feeling it within ourselves, but we can't feel it within ourselves unless we're open to our own issues when they talk about theirs. We don't need to share our issues with them, but we need to share our issues with ourselves so that when they talk, we can say, oh, I know something of that. I don't have that problem, but I have another problem. Okay. And I can see how hard it is for them. And I can see how weak they feel when they have to face this or that particular problem of theirs. And I have this old problem and I've had it for all my life. Why am I expecting them to get rid of their problem after 3 sessions with me?
Right.
So what it did is it humanized the experience that we have when we're sitting down with our clients. Because when I do my therapy, I'm reliving my life all the time.
Yeah.
They're talking about their issues. I'm remembering this and I'm remembering that. And I'm conscious of my struggle with my wife and my daughter, that I caused my own problems. Okay. And by being able to be honest with myself, I'm able to feel something of what they're feeling.
Right.
So then instead of using a Rorschach ink blot,
Right.
I'm the ink blot. You know, how I experience them is the ink blot. And so I can experience their fears. I can experience their insecurities. I can experience their feeling weak when it comes to the problems that they've had and dealing with them. And I can care about them.
Right.
So that the issue isn't my resolving my problems. The issue is that I need to take responsibility for my problems. And I need to see that my problems help me to relate to their problems. They don't need to know what I'm feeling, but they need to know that I care.
Yes.
So that when they're with me, they feel this is another human being who's really listening with me, who really cares about what I'm going through. I can see it in their face. I can see it in their expression. And then they trust me.
Right.
Okay, because I'm not here sitting on a cloud looking down at them.
Right.
I'm on the same ground that they are in. And you're wounded, I'm wounded. Okay. And because I'm wounded, it helps me to understand and get a sense of what you're going through. So that I become the ink blot. I become the Rorschach test. Okay. You need to be aware of yourself, and you need to be aware that this is part of your own humanity. Okay.
Yes.
We all have our issues. We all have our pain. But the difference is we need to be aware and take responsibility for it. Okay. That gives us a chance to resolve it, or at least be in control of it, so that we don't then hurt people or hurt ourselves and do things that we shouldn't be doing to ourselves or to other people. We have more control over our lives. And when you sit down with your clients, that's what you're looking for. The degree to which they're able to resolve their issues, that depends on the work that you do. And sometimes you're really able to resolve it. Sometimes you're able to get it under control. You're really relating to what they're experiencing.
Right.
And you're experiencing with your own experience of life.
Yeah.
I remember, I often give this example, but I'm sitting down with this was a white couple, very well-to-do, very bright people, very gifted people, and a husband and wife. They were having marital problems. And I'm looking at the wife, and she's got her legs tightly closed, her arms crossed, and the guy is talking. And I'm thinking, this woman is cutting herself off from this guy. I don't know what's going on between them, but this is not good. So I say to her, you're afraid of him, aren't you? And she says, yes, I am. Well, that triggered him. Okay, he lost it because he started to get up over her, screaming at her, intimidating the hell out of her.
Wow.
Okay, so my first instinct, of course, I'm back in in my old neighborhood. Do I jump this guy or don't I? I said, I don't think this is what I should be doing as a therapist. But, what I did was, though, I was always conscious. I grew up fighting. That was part of where I grew up.
Yeah.
But how many times you're afraid?
Right.
Okay, but you're not going to tell the guy who's opposite you that you're afraid of him. Okay.
Right.
And you're not going to let that fear overwhelm you and paralyze you. Okay. You just keep it to yourself. And I thought, maybe if I tell him that I'm afraid, it'll disarm him. I said to the guy, hey, Robert, I'm afraid of you right now. It stopped him cold. He said, what?
Wow.
We had a relationship. He said, you're afraid of me? I said, man, the way you're acting, it looks like you could hurt her or you could hurt me by trying to stop you. I said, I'm really afraid of you right now. He sat down and he began to cry.
Wow.
But that meant that I was using myself and using my own vulnerability.
Right.
And I was using that as an intervention.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the use of self. I have another situation where a guy came in with his wife and 3 kids, and the adolescent son had cursed at the mother. The father was walking down the hallway, and the guy comes in. He's feeling very guilty because he hit his son. He never lost his temper before. And I said, well, tell me, just spell it out for me. Tell me what actually happened. He says, well, I'm walking down the hallway in my house and I hear my son yelling at my wife, the kid's mother, and my son is really being disrespectful. And when I came up to him, I just lost it and I punched him. That stopped him, but I shouldn't have punched him. I said, well, what was going on with you? He says, I don't know. I just lost it. And then the mother said, well, he's been under a lot of stress because his mother is dying. He's been taking care of his mother. There's no father in the home. He's the only son that she has. So I said, well, tell me about that. So, well, I'm adopted, he said. So then I got the story about how the mother is she was single, she wasn't married, she wanted to adopt a son. She lied and used whatever she could to convince people that she could be a good parent, even though she didn't have a husband and she was just a person by herself. Well, they let her adopt him. She raised him. And he felt really obligated to her because the woman had poured her heart out for him.
Yeah.
Now she's dying, and now he's the parent. We started to talk about that, and you could just feel the pain.
Yeah.
She gave me everything. She did everything for me. She raised me. She was really dedicated to me, and I owe her everything. And I said, but it doesn't sound like you're allowing your family to support you, to help you with her. Well, I didn't think of that. I just thought, this is my mother, not their mother. And then his wife says, we want to support him, but he just doesn't let us be there for him. And I said, well, given your feeling about your mother, I kind of understand why you lost it with your son. And I also understand you're feeling guilty about it. Yes, you shouldn't have punched him, but there was a reason why you punched him. It was because of your sense of, how can you do this to your mother?
Right.
Okay. And the fact that you're not letting your family support you and be there for you, okay, just raises the tension that you had all stored up inside of you. Okay. And then you lost it. Well, God, it made sense to him.
Right.
You could see he was all heart for his kids.
Right.
And then his kids, his wife, his son, his daughters, they're all there saying, let us help you. Let us be there for you. And I said to the guy, well, are you going to pay attention to them or aren't you? He says, yes, I really should. I got them together.
Right.
Okay. And the guy said, you understood everything that I was going through and what I was feeling. And I said, I'm glad you felt that I was there for you and that I really understood you. But what you did it yourself and you did it with your family that was there for you. So he left, the family left. I felt that it was a successful session. I did this in front of an audience of a university.
Oh, really? My gosh. Wow.
We were in a separate room, but they were seeing it closed circuit. The family had given us permission to do this.
Wow.
And then I said to the audience, I'm feeling the emotion myself right now. My mother died a week ago.
Oh, my God.
Right.
Wow.
And my father had died a year ago before that. Okay.
Wow.
I said, I was reliving my whole experience with my mother. She was in New York. I'm in Philadelphia. And she was all by herself. And I remember her saying to me in Spanish, I'm mute. And I said, what do you mean you're mute? She says, I have nobody to talk to because my husband died. Well, she lived for 1 year after he had died. Then she died. Well, I had to make a conscious decision. I want to relive what I went through with my mother.
Yeah.
And I want to let that teach me what he's going through.
Right.
Okay. That's the use of self. Okay. That's the person of the therapist.
And what I imagine you, with all the work that you've done on yourself, you built the capacity to tolerate that, even though it was an acute grief, right, that you were experiencing. Absolutely. Because I can imagine some younger therapists maybe who haven't developed that capacity yet wouldn't be able to be with that in the room with somebody else experiencing it right away.
I was supervising one therapist who was a student through one of these two-way mirrors. And she was seeing a family, mother and some young ladies, but one of them was the patient. And in the middle of the session, she suddenly says to the family, I need to talk with my supervisor. But she comes in and she just starts crying to me. I said, what's going on? And she said, this is my family all together.
Yeah.
She said, what they're presenting, I've lived this. I can't talk to them. I can't deal with this. She was, what you're talking about? I said, well, let's go in. I'll go in with you. And anyway, I told them that you touched a chord with her because of her own family experience, and I understand that, but I would like you to really give some thought to how delicate this thing is between you, mother, and you, daughter.
Yeah.
And I'd like for you to take the videotape of today. I want you to take it home because the mother was a therapist.
Okay.
So I gave them the videotape. I want you and your daughter to watch this and then to talk about it. Well, they came back the next week and the mother says, I have to tell you something. What's going on with my daughter, I lived through that with my own mother.
Of course.
And I was able to then share it with my daughter, and we really got together, and it just opened things up for them. It was a matter of being able to think of, what am I going through? What have I gone through? What does this feel like for me? And I wanted the therapist to be conscious of their own vulnerabilities, their own humanity, to be able to use it, to be able to feel with their clients. Okay, not just listen to their stories and put these things together as a scientist. You got to do that.
Right.
But that wasn't enough. You got to feel with them.
Yes.
Okay. And if you can feel with them, you become like the Rorschach. You're understanding them, but from inside.
Right.
Okay. And you can work from that place. I do that all the time with my clients. So when I'm sitting down with them, I'm also remembering something about me, something about my own weaknesses, and my own struggles, so that I could feel with them, so that then I could then feel them, not just hear them, but feel them. And I could understand them, and I could relate in a real way to what they were struggling with.
So would you consider yourself a wounded healer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm an only child. My parents had a troubled marriage. Okay. I remember that, how that difficult, painful that was for me to see that as a kid. So I live with that. I know what that's like.
Right.
So that when they come in with these problems, nothing is new to me.
Right.
But I had to get to a place where I said, this stuff that I was embarrassed about, I can't be embarrassed about this, because all human beings, we all suffer, we all struggle. There's pain in all of our lives. Okay. I can use this to feel with my clients, okay, to walk in the shoes with them. They don't know it. I'm not going to share this part of my story with them. That's going to just distract them from their story. But they see that I care. They see that I understand.
Right.
And I want you to get used to your own issues so that you can be on top of them and stop trying to hide from them.
Yes.
Because they're real and they cause you pain, they cause you hurt. But now you can use them in a way that's going to help you to be a better therapist, a more human therapist. Okay, that's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, if people want to learn more about this modality, do you do any trainings anymore, or where can people learn more about this?
Well, I do trainings, and I also have two people who are that I've trained who know how to do this. If they look me up on the internet,
great,
I can then either do the training myself, or the people that I've trained can do it for me. And they're real experts. They're very good at it. They're two women. They're both psychologists. They both have their doctorates. Okay, they're very well-trained people, and they're very caring people. So I'm available. They're available.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm always so appreciative when I get to sit down with someone who's been practicing and for a long time and can share their wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to our guest for an amazing conversation today. To find out more about today's guest, you can visit www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast.
You can find Sarah at Head Heart Biz Therapy on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can find Anne at Spare Room Wellness or spareroomwellness.com.
Thanks as always to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Until next time, bye-bye.